set the stage for our conversation on Heirs Property. I'm really thrilled to introduce to you one of our board members, the Chief of Operations at the Center for Heirs Property Preservation based in South Carolina. So Mr. Josh Walden, let's give him a round of applause as he kind of lays a foundation for our upcoming panel discussion on Heirs Property Resolution and what it looks like at SFLR. So take it away, Josh.
Thank you, Bethany. It's been a wonderful event so far. I've been privy to all the previous discussions, and they're outstanding. I wouldn't be one of those people that Ebony was talking about as an attorney if I didn't give a brief disclaimer, and that's this. The legal concepts we're about to look at over the next 3 slides are generally something that's applicable from state to state. But like I tell my clients, and I tell our communities when we're doing legal education, the devil's in the details. So that your particular state's laws and your particular set of family circumstances will have an effect on what your rights may or may not be. But in the end, when we're talking about heirs property, a lot of times what we're talking about, and we often hear about chain of title, marketability of title, clear or clean title, or cloud on the chain of title. To understand what those really are talking about, one of the things you have to understand is how land records are kept and where that term comes from. In every state, you're generally going to have a state office or a county office that records deeds of transfers from one person to the other. You're generally also going to have a probate court, and that probate court is going to do primarily what that probate court is going to do primarily is take property out of the name of someone who's deceased and putting it into the name of someone who's living. Now, over the course of time, you could go back to 1900. There should be a chain of title, an ability to track the ownership across time, and that's generally what a chain of title is referring to. You should be able to go into the county deed office, deed to deed to deed, as properties are sold or given away by someone signing a deed. If someone dies owning property, there should be a public record in the probate court indicating that this person died. And if they had a will, they've decided who's inherited that property. If they didn't have a will, every state generally has an intestacy code. And what that basically is if you don't decide who you want to own your property when you pass away, the state that you live in will decide who owns that property when you pass away. So it goes somewhere. So when we're talking about heirs property, generally we're talking about a situation where no will existed. So the folks who have inherited this property are the folks under the local state statute that say inherit when someone dies without a will. Oftentimes what we come across is heirs property without clear title. And basically what that means is the property still in the name of the original owner, the owner who's passed away, whether that be a spouse, whether that be parents, grandparents, great-great-great-great-grandparents, depending on how far your property may go back inside the family. For purposes of that public record, the last person of record to own it is that person who's passed away. Heirs property with clear title, what I'm usually referring to there is someone's died without a will, but they actually go through the probate court process of creating the record of who the current owners are. You just may have 70 owners, which obviously presents some pretty tangible problems for the family and otherwise that we'll get into a little bit later. So that's sort of the sandbox you're playing in when you're talking about why does chain of title matter? What is clear title? The ability to determine and clearly show who the owners are is what constitutes that chain of title and makes property marketable. In other words, that you can use it to its fullest extent as a true asset. And go to the next one, please. So at this point, oftentimes what we encounter with the folks that we serve is, well, what do I own? What do heirs property owners own if they're owning it collectively? So ultimately, when more than one person owns property or land together, they're generally called tenancy in common form of ownership. It's when more than one person owns land and they each have their individual rights and equal use to enjoyment and ownership of that tract. So the example we often give, if you had 10 heirs and 10 acres, if you thought about that and you're logical, you would think, okay, everyone owns 1 acre. The issue with tenancy in common is that 10 heirs and 10 acres doesn't equate to 10 people owning 1 acre apiece. They all own 1/10 interest in 10 acres. So they all have equal rights to use and enjoyment. And if they want to divide that property up, if that's where they want to go, that's a legal process called a partition. That form of ownership and that scenario lends itself to vulnerability as far as land loss, which we'll get into in a little bit. Limited access to wealth building resource is one of the byproducts of this form of ownership. As Cheryl and as Ebony clearly stated earlier, the inability to access the property, use the property, get a loan on the property, enter into contracts involving the property, making decisions across the board of property become extremely difficult, if not impossible, in particular circumstances when you have heirs property. Can't get a mortgage generally, can't get a refi, can't get a building loan. You're going to have limited options in regards to NRCS or USDA programs across the board. It's a limiting factor. Next. Land loss in heirs property. An inordinate amount of property has been lost over the years, particularly for African-American landowners because of this form of ownership. And the way that sort of rears its head, the multi-generational intestacy, those generations of folks passing without a will, and those ownership interests trickle down. So eventually you go from 10 heirs with 10 acres to 100 heirs with 10 acres, which, as you might imagine, becomes a lot more problematic and goes into issues of agreement amongst the heirs. One of the issues we see is heir-initiated partition sales. There's a legal action whereby any of those 10 owners or any owners inside the body of an heirs property ownership group can force a sale as against their other heirs. Predatory development. There's a long history of predatory development in regards to developers buying the interest of one of the heirs and then stepping into the shoes of that heir, being able to bring that same partition sale action and forcing a sale. And very often the heirs are not in a position whereby they can buy that particular interest out under the Uniform Heirs Property Partition Act, if that's something that's in your particular state. That act does not do away with predatory development and partition sales, but it does lay some groundwork for some defense. Tax assessments and tax sales are a big threat to heirs property. Very often heirs property owners cannot get the most advantageous tax assessment, which makes their taxes extremely high and can result in tax sales. And there's even a county in South Carolina that if an heirs property tract goes to tax sale, if the title's not resolved, the heir who's been paying the taxes all along can't redeem a tax sale. So it's lost to the family forever. Rural gentrification is just one of those things that maybe isn't talked as much as urban or gentrification in a more urban setting, but there's an ever encroaching development as communities as communities see development come in that maybe are jobs associated with large organizations like Volvo or BMW. They're going to need an infrastructure and land, and that's when it becomes extremely vulnerable and can almost feel like it happens overnight. And ultimately, losing heirs property is a process where the opportunity for generational wealth can be lost, because if the property is not working for the family, which makes it extremely difficult for that to happen when it is in this form of ownership, often it results in heir-initiated partition sales or room for a predatory developer to breach that family group and buy the interest of someone who's maybe 2 generations removed. So that's a 10-mile view of a very complex and nuanced area of law, but hopefully that sets the stage for our discussion.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Josh. It really is helpful. I find that we all bring just different levels of experience and expertise to the table when it comes to heirs property resolution, both the scale of the problem and what's needed to scale solutions. And so thank you for laying that foundation for us. We're now going to invite our panelists up to discuss this from a variety of different vantage points. We, of course, have Josh here as lawyer and being from the Center for Heirs Property Preservation. We have Ms. Tiari Todman here, who's with Winston County Self-Help Cooperative, kind of really holding the team together there and making sure that these services are being deployed on the ground. We have Mr. Shawn Boler here, who is a remote landowner whose land is in Arkansas and has a really incredible story to tell about the heirs property resolution process for his family. And then we have Miss Karen Lee here, who's a program specialist with Keeping It in the Family program at University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Again, this is our last panel of the day. I also think, let me see, make sure I'm right. Since we lost Mr. Perry at our last session, Mr. Alton Perry from Roanoke, if the technology supports us, he will be joining us in this conversation as well, just to lend his expertise as the director of the Roanoke program. So thank you to all of our panelists for being here. Let's give them a round of applause in the chat and we will dive in. All right, let's see. We can come out of screen share mode. There we go. All right. Hello. Welcome back, Mr. Perry. We're happy to have you. I'm going to kick my first question over to Tiari. And I know that you are not a lawyer, but that's a part of why I wanted you on the panel, because when it comes to solving these issues for our communities, it takes a team, not just lawyers, but a team of people. And so I'd love to hear from you. What is one thing that you think people often misunderstand about heirs property resolution for landowners in our communities?
So firstly, I think they misunderstand the timeline it takes to resolve heirs property. It is a lengthy process. It takes all parties involved to be on one page. And if that one person is not on page, resolution cannot go forward. And if they are all on one page and someone dies in the process, that starts the whole, not hopefully not all over again, but it can start the process again, especially if the person who was leading the charge is the one that passed away. Then it takes, who's the next leader, who is taking the charge, who is the financer in this process. Also, Josh brought it up earlier about the 1/10 in commons. So one thing families have to understand, if you're an aunt, right, and your sibling died and now their children are the heirs, those children will have to understand that their share is going to be split, meaning they're going to have less of land than their aunt or their uncle, right? And so that too, that is something you have to educate individuals on. Also just location of how the land is going to be divided. Some people may want their land on this side where it's agreed upon for it to be here for the aunts, there for the uncles, and back here for the kids. So there's a lot of contention that can really happen during resolution, and not all resolution is good, right? So those are some of the issues that we have to talk our family members through as they're going through the process of trying to get their land resolved.
Yeah,
And
thank
finding family members that are missing. And I mean that's a big situation. So it's just getting on the same page is I think the key here for families to understand that you must all be on one page in order for this to proceed.
Yes, that's so real. I mean, I think about with my own family and just trying to get on the same page about when we're going to start dinner for for a holiday, and just like those very low stakes decisions can be really tricky when you have a big family. And so when we're talking heirs property resolution, we're talking money, investment, time. It's a very high stakes decision. And I can only imagine the complexity that families have to move through. And we'll hear some stories to that effect here in a moment. I want to jump down to Miss Karen. Again, I know you're not a lawyer, but a lot of your work is taking those steps one at a time with a landowner to help them figure out what they want to do. And so what is a typical process you walk landowners through when they're working to resolve or clear title on their properties? What does that process look like?
Okay, that's a great question. For us working with the landowner, it's a holistic approach. So what we're going to start with is a team effort. It's a team building effort. We cannot do this alone and be effective. So what we have is a group of people who are passionate about the success of people. So we take that time to know about those individuals. We've invested with people like SFLR Network, the endowment, USDA, Forestry Department. We've invested with numerous people trying to find out and make sure we're educated, first of all, about what it is that's needed from the individuals. So once we get that, then part of that process now becomes educating the individual. So we become more knowledgeable, and we have to transfer that knowledge, like T and Josh were saying a little bit earlier, because like you said, we're not attorneys. Let's go there. We do have an attorney, so an attorney is a part of our team, but just the basic understanding of what my percentage means and how that doesn't mean that I have I don't have, just because there's 10 of us, that doesn't mean I have this 1 acre, because a lot of people don't understand it. So breaking down that part to where people can understand that. So when we're going at them, we're going at that holistic part, knowing that we're dealing with individuals who are just like ourselves that don't know everything. And I like that Mr. Boler is on here, because he's the one that I've adopted this from. I don't know what I don't know. And so when we get to people, we don't assume that they know anything. So we're embracing that whole individual, and we're building that trust. We're taking that landowner profile, finding information about them, and then, our outreach coordinator, she's making that initial contact, as well as one of our conservationists. They're making that contact to get to know this family, to get to build these relationships. But what we're doing is building that trust. Because once an individual trusts you, they let those guards down that have been embedded for years, for generations. There's this, I don't trust, it's a career university, so I don't trust the government, or something like that. So we're building that trust, so where you're comfortable enough to share with us some things. So before we point you to another direction, we need to know where you are. So we'll know that we're pointing you in the right direction as we're trying to walk with you. We go out to your property, we look at it, because you got to understand, and don't want to alienate people, but we're trying to build generational wealth. We're trying to get people to keep land in their family. Other people can work with people if you want to do something to sell it, but we're trying to get people to keep this land and find ways that they can resolve issues and work together for generations to come, for the generational wealth and the generational health of the land. So once we identify and we work with the individuals and find that, now we're going to turn them over to the attorney for consultation, which is vital, because they need to know that legal aspect of it. But we've worked with them up to that point to find out, okay, have you did the family tree? Whose name is this in? Whose name is this property in? Is it in your name? Is it in two brothers' name? When did it change title? Did y'all ever probate it? What's going on? Has it been where are you? Because a lot of times when you ask those questions, then they be like, I don't know. Well, this is not the time for you to go to an attorney when you just at that initial stage of not knowing it. So we try to get people better prepared. So then when they go to the attorney, then now they're better prepared to ask and receive. And so we treat people, I think the most effective thing in working to clear their titles on their property, we treat people the way that we want to be treated. And we treat them like their success is our success, because it's very important to us that people are successful. is very important. I mean, I just can't tell you. And we've got a team that believes that. We've got partners that believe that. And I think when you believe in the value of individuals, then you can stay committed to that positive outcome from us. So in working with that, again, it's about education, identifying that, building that level of trust, and then pointing people in the right direction.
Wonderful. Thank you, Miss Karen. We're going to go to Mr. Boler here in a moment, but I want to jump to Alton. I know I haven't prepped you with this question. What's the process like at Roanoke when a landowner is having heirs property challenges, or they run into that in their forest management work or aspirations? What process does Roanoke take landowners through?
Well, thank you for having me back. Fingers crossed that we can get through this. With Roanoke, as Ms. Karen said, and as T said, we're not attorneys. We don't have attorneys on staff. So our model is a little different, is that we refer landowners who need services out to attorneys that we have worked with, or we create a list of attorneys that we have worked with, and they say we will take on clients coming out of the Roanoke SFLR. So we look at it as two-pronged. The first prong is going to be the forestry side of it. And believe it or not, you can do some things while it is still in heirs property around conservation and forestry. If it's nothing more than getting a forest management plan, which allows the family to have an idea of what they have as a forest, what types of trees, what are some of the recommendations? Is it ready for a timber sale? Which can go along in bringing people together because you have some economic opportunities there. While we're working on the forest management, that gets done. Then we again work with them to get them in line to meet with the attorneys, because the attorneys have told us, even though that can be costly, they want to reduce that cost as much as they can. So if a landowner can come in prepared with information that they've already put together, so the attorney doesn't have to spend the time doing that and charging the landowner. And so the other part of that is that Roanoke has been fortunate enough with some of our partners to provide financial assistance around those legal services and forest management services, but specifically on those legal services. If it's nothing more than just doing the consultation costs, or in some cases, we are providing assistance to do the wills or an accession plan or some type of estate planning as well.
Yeah. That's great. I thank you. I appreciate you making that point, Alton, about the role that partners play in making this process accessible for our landowners, because it can be lengthy, it can be costly for those who are able to invest in the network and able to invest in this work on the ground. It really does go a long way for building that generational wealth and health of both soil and families, to borrow that from Ms. Karen. I want to kick things over to Mr. Shawn Boler, who is here with us, a landowner who's worked with the Keeping It in the Family team. Mr. Boler, you are one of many heirs, if I'm correct, of your family land. And so I'm wondering if you can tell the story of how your family acquired your family land, and just what were some of the inner workings and dynamics of moving your heirs property situation to a point of, let's call it resolved for now. I would love for you to tell your story.
Well, thank you, Bethaney. I'm honored to be here, and I appreciate you and the SFLR network for having me. The work that the network does alongside of the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff's Keep It in the Family team is priceless for heirs landowners like myself. Miss Karen, my buddy, there's obviously a love-hate relationship there, because I know I drive them crazy, but they have been the team that I've needed. I'm known for saying I don't know what I don't know, and it's because of the network and the UAPB team that if we're going to say that we're successful, it's because of UAPB and Miss Karen and her team. Couldn't do it without her. My family is a 129-year-old, originally 115-acre farm established in Howard County back in about 1896 by my grandparents, Ransom Adamson and his wife, Nancy Whitmore Adamson. And they used the land to raise vegetables and livestock to feed the family and generate income. They had about 13 children. Over time, those heirs whittled down to about 6, one being my mother. We are a total of 39 heirs in 9 states at the moment. We stretch from Hawaii on the west all the way down to Florida in the southeast, from New York in the northeast all the way back down to Arizona or Southern California, even in the southwest. When you talk about inner workings and dynamics and getting on the same page, the family is now, the farm is now down to about 60 acres of managed forest land that was originally established in about the forest first formalized planting of timber in 1993 of loblolly pine, where we worked closely with the Forest Division of the Arkansas Department of Agriculture to get involved. We've had numerous awards and certifications bestowed on us with the help of SFLR and UAPB. The estate has been identified as an American Tree Farm by the American Forest Foundation. We've been designated as a stewardship forest by the Department of Forestry's division, and certified as a Centennial Family Forest by the Arkansas Forest Association. The most recent accolade came in December of 2020 when the estate was designated as an Arkansas Century Farm by the state. And that's for farms in the state that have operated for over 100 years. So we were honored with the help of UAPB and the other partners to achieve these accolades, all of which work to galvanize those inner workings and family dynamics, where the family can see how the land can prosper and be self-sustaining. One of the things I like to compare what this journey has been, and I don't know if Kat has the picture or not, but for those that are familiar with there's a Japanese art called kintsugi. And if you've not heard of kintsugi, it's a Japanese art of mending broken objects that have been damaged over time by filling the cracks with gold. And it's believed that something that's suffered damage and has a history, it can become very beautiful. And that's what SFLR and the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff has done for my family. Our estate was pretty much like that pieces of broken glass on the left, but today I feel we're well within the realm of being that beautiful vase on the right as a result of what Karen's team and your team has done in knowledge, education, resource availability. That's the goal of those certifications. Each of those certifications, in my opinion, is SFLR allowing that gold to mend that property back today, where those 39 heirs have shares in a family trust that we established in 2023, where we all have ownership of various shares. And I'm one of the least shareholders. I only have like 1.5 shares, and there are other shareholders that have 10 or 12 shares. But we have a board of trustees and bylaws, which I happen to sit as the administrator of, and we have a very small group that actually handles those multi-generational decisions on behalf of the other members of the trust. So whether we're getting involved in CSP programs or carbon capture programs, and expanding on various additional alternative revenue streams, that's the way we deal with those decisions. I try to make sure that as a trustee, one of the lead trustees, I want to make sure I'm under promising to the shareholders in general and over delivering. And that's what the family trust allows us to do. And, you know, it's webinars like this and the knowledge that comes from this, you know, I see sheroes like Ebony Alexander, yourself, Karen Lee, that just embark and impart information. One of my key sheroes is Miss Dr. Kamara Neal, who was instrumental in the Uniform Partition Heirs Property Act, which again is the underpinning of resolving some of the heirs property problems. So we've come a long way. I still feel we got a long way to go. This year, this year, I was fortunate enough, we had a substantial thinning or harvest, and I was able to write the first of what I hope will be many dividend checks to those 39 heirs. And it was really emotional to write those checks and then have my cousins, some of which didn't even know what was going on, like, why am I getting this money? Well, you're getting this money because your grandmama's mama had interest in this land, and we developed a website so they can go and see and get a feeling for it. And it's those sorts of things that galvanize the family, galvanize the estate, and getting information. Like, you know, I heard Joe Friend, who is the whole UAPB team I consider family. But when we get information like there's a potential for a jet fuel factory to be built in Camden, Arkansas, or that UAPB has 6 side-by-sides that can help with getting the family to know more about the land. It's those sorts of things that are just invaluable in the work that you guys do to helping us on this, what I'm going to call kintsugi journey of putting the property back together. So hopefully that speaks to the points that you asked.
Yes, it does. More than speaks to the points. Thank you so much for sharing that story. It gives me chills when I hear it. It's so inspiring. I know it's inspiring to those who are listening and who are thinking about the significance of the work the SFLR network sites do. I have a question that's really for all of the site directors and even Mr. Boler, you could speak to this as well. I'm curious to know, like, the numbers. How much does it cost for a family to resolve their heirs property? And I know that's broad. That's a big question. But I would, if you can speak to maybe from your different vantage points, you know, what are the costs associated with this process of helping landowners get from point A to point B so that they too can begin writing dividend checks to their landowners? That's my question.
Well, since I'm still on mic, I'll go first, but I'll tell you that my journey was no less than $18,000. And that's $18,000 that started in 2017 that I basically subsidized until this past harvest. So that's one of the things that you have to be able to do. And some of that was also subsidized by UAPB and SFLR cost sharing programs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Boler. Miss T, we can go around and maybe Miss T, then Miss Karen, and then Josh or Alton, if you can weigh in to help the audience understand what we're talking about here in terms of numbers. Yeah.
Yes. For here in the great state of Mississippi, we start about 8,000 and up, and it just depends on the amount of heirs, the size of the property. I mean, there's many different factors that are involved, but 8,000 is a good starting point for us to share.
Thank you, Miss T. Miss Karen.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to what I'm gonna have to say it depends. It depends. It depends on the amount of family members. It depends on if they're working together, if they're not working together. It could be as cheap as filing costs for whatever it is that they're doing because the family has worked together and spent their time and they are in agreement. It could go up into the hundreds of thousands depending on, because I know one person said something to me like, we've worked and we've been fighting, and it's up to $100,000 now. So it just depends. If you can get people working together, it's gonna be cheaper. When you can't get the people to work together, then that's where all the expenses come in, because there are just some things that you can do on your own. So when we're telling people about how to resolve it, there are just some costs that are in there. Surveys, working with partners and stuff like that, we're able to cover some of the survey costs. But there are survey costs. We've had survey costs as little as $900. We've had them to exceed $15,000. So again, it's just going to depend on the landowner and what they're dealing with. And of course, they need to understand that there's stuff like taxes that they got to deal with. So there are a lot of things that you have to deal with. The issue is to deal with it. These are not things that you can't handle. It's just that you just got to face them. And if you face them with that positive thinking of not, oh, how I'm going to do it, but how can I do this? Then you will find that you will find ways to do that. The money, there are going to be different avenues where you'll be able to find the money. I don't know how that happens, but it just works out when you're looking from it from a positive standpoint, as opposed to a mountain that you cannot get over. You can have that mountain moved when you deal with the issue. So again, when you're talking about the different costs, there are just different costs. You got filing fees, you got surveys, you got trying to find people, creating family trees, going through those costs, trying to get that information established and stuff like that. Then of course you don't, like we said before, there are going to be attorney fees. And we're not even talking about like the labor that we do. And I'm so grateful to God that we've got people who failed at retirement that came back to help us. Because that expertise, like these people that are on here, the expertise, the knowledge, it is just invaluable. But when you got foresters and you got conservationists and you got an attorney and you got somebody that just loves people, because Candy just like everybody's this little soft bear. But when you got people who are like that, and we don't charge, I mean, somebody else is charging, but here in Arkansas, we don't charge for those services. So people should take advantage of those. But if you somewhere where that they do charge, then those basic services that we're providing may come into the thousands of dollars. So you have to find that what you have out there, those recesses, and tap into them. So I know that's long, but that's just part of the process. But the process works. We've got to trust the process. It works. We don't, my son said something one time that was so profound, and I thought it was a little smart and I wanted to hit him. I cut across the grass. I cut across the grass to go somewhere, and he said, Mom, there are no shortcuts in life. You need to walk around on the sidewalk. Yeah, that's what my son said to me. So, but that's reality. There are no shortcuts, because you don't know what you're going to learn in the process. You don't know what relationship you might develop in that process. You might be thinking, oh, I got to come up with this. And then you get in contact with somebody that say, hey, I know somebody that wants to cover your costs. And so it's not going to cost you anything but the work that you put into it. So the costs will vary. It's just about what you put into it as an individual.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Miss Karen. I often think the landowner, and this is true, I think, in life, someone has to want it more than you want it for them so that they make that investment themselves, whether it's time, research, whatever money they do have to put into the process. It really is a collaboration between that person and their passion and desire to see it happen, and then the support that the SFLR sites are able to provide. It creates a really powerful synergy when both parties are able to show up and bring their very best. We have a question that came through in the Q&A that I want to amplify here. Actually, there are two, and then I'll jump back to the questions I have. One is, are there common mistakes families make when attempting to resolve heirs property without legal or professional support? And I want to kick that one over to Josh first, but then anyone else can jump in. But are there common mistakes you see families make when trying to go at this on their own?
Yeah, certainly. And they're usually based on a belief that there's been a lot of talk about sort of myths associated with heirs property, which can lead somebody to doing something that actually makes them more vulnerable and causes a problem. One thing we see oftentimes are people getting together and pulling a deed offline, or one of these legal form deed offline, and they will transfer interest, or they think they're transferring a piece of the property. And again, with heirs property, you don't own a piece, you own a fractionalized interest based on your estate's intestacy law. It could turn into and equate to acreage, but that's a whole different legal process and requires agreement. So we see a lot of folks doing that, having deeds, or even in their wills, framing things a certain way, particularly when they're not involved in an attorney, and putting it in layman's terms, and it doesn't accomplish what they want to accomplish it. Another thing that we often see is people will let their property go to tax sale, thinking that a tax sale, if they were to bid on it, somehow clears title to the property and they get a tax deed, which it does not clear title. It basically remains heirs property. The title remains clouded, and oftentimes folks they'll have someone notarize a piece of paper that says, I'm giving away all my interest, and give it to them, and then that person passes away and they think that somehow transfers an interest, and in most cases it does not, given the statutes of your particular state. So just a lot of things, having just enough information and being sort of right, but not knowing just sort of the full legal ramifications of doing something like that, can cause a big problem.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any other thoughts or comments? Alton, perhaps, what common mistakes have you seen, if you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I'll leave all of that to Josh. He's the attorney on on board here, but I will say that with heirs property, a common mistake that's made is around timber sales. Oftentimes, again, one of those myths is, I live here on the property, or I live in the state where the property is located. I can sell the timber, I can do the farm lease, I can do everything. But if you are in an heir property situation, you have to get agreement amongst everyone. And oftentimes that's a common mistake. I can't tell you the number of times over my career I've talked to people who are living in New York and other places, and they come home for a family reunion, and Uncle Joe has sold all the timber, but there's no money to give anybody else, and it just fractionates the family, and it's discord, and it's hard to bring them back together because they just didn't have the knowledge. And it goes all the way back to where SFLR was formed, because of not having access, specifically around African American landowners and other underrepresented demographics as well. They just didn't know that they needed wills and needed attorneys and those types of things. And I'll close with the saying is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So there are opportunities that we come across where the landowner are not in heirs property at this point. And so we're catching them at a very opportunistic time where we can help them to reduce that risk of heirs property down the road by going through this process, as Karen so eloquently put out there, is that now's the time to get your affairs and everything in order, because you're at a point where it may be only a brother and a sister, and now everything is in place, and you want to set up a success for your next generation. So
Yeah. that's
preventative
great.
care is so important.
Yeah. And another question that's been submitted, someone asks, are there programs that focus on helping families with their money mindset, encouraging financial stewardship and understanding the value of land and changing the way they see the land and the value of holding on to it? Do you all have any specific recommendations? I know this is work that you all do every day with your landowners, helping them understand that asset, figuring out how to protect it. But do you have any, I don't know, specific programs that you'd recommend? No worries if not, but I wanted to pose that. Okay.
I was trying to come off mute. Well, we do that holistic approach. So explaining people the business aspect of it, I think is a part of the succession planning, getting people to understand that, when you're doing the wills, how do you set things up? We also talk to people about taking things out of their name, transferring it into a business name, trying to show them how to set up a business and the business structure part of it, because all of that is relevant in an individual's success, and explaining to them in that process of what's all entailed in you not treating this as a business. Because I think when people can treat this as a business, they make business decisions. And when you're making that business decision, it makes it a little bit easier because you take the emotional part out of it and you understand that now we're doing what's best for the family. So we do teach the financial part of it, the business structure part of it, the educational part of it, because for us, we're a university, so the education part of it is always going to be crucial for us. And because when you are informed, you can make an informed decision. When you don't know and you don't know that especially that, then you're always guessing, or you're doing things that you'll come back later and have to address and correct. And it's not always easier. Trust it from somebody who's fallen a couple of times. It's easier to fall than it is to get up. And the more times you fall, the harder it becomes and the more it wears on you. So learning to do things up in the front, or just now, because it's always right to start right. It's always right when you know what's right to start doing it. And so you don't have to, it's not, there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing. What's wrong is that you don't try to improve and try to do better. And there are programs. It's not just our program, but there are so many programs. And if you want to go online, there are things online that can help you. Different places, like I think Chase has something. Wells Fargo has some online financial management tools that you can go through and you can learn it. Believe it or not, Monopoly is a good financial tool. It's a good family financial tool. So you're building things like that. And there are other games and stuff like that. There are ways to build your financial understanding, and you can just apply that to your life. Just figure out how to do it. You know that it's important. Now you've got to actively do it. You don't have to have a lot of money to do that. We go online. Every kid just about around the country, almost at the age of, I don't know, 2, because mine didn't have until they were teenagers, but they have a phone. Well, if they've got a phone, then they can access, instead of accessing, what is it the kid talking about? Roblox. Instead of doing Roblox, maybe get them to do some type of financial awareness or something like that. Have those conversations with people about death so that they understand that death is a part of life, so that transition is not so hard for them. And okay, now we've got to make the decisions about what we're going to do and have those things in place. This becomes a family's responsibility. You've got organizations and avenues out there, but the first place that it starts is with the individual.
That's great. Thank you, Miss Karen. Absolutely. T, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I was gonna just jump in. I don't have a reference per se to share, but as Miss Karen was talking, that just the on the ground experience. I know for myself and my family, we bring the kids in, We've showed them what the outcomes are when you get a tract of land and you grow trees and then you clear harvest the trees. This is what it was for us to put in, the input for the output. So those are really great examples to be able to share if you have that opportunity. If not, yes, there are a lot of online resources, but each one of us, each organization, we all provide education, technical assistance. And, if you just tap into one of the organizations, we'll be able to give more in-depth information on what we can do on today.
Yeah, that's great, T. And that point's really important. There are a couple of questions that have been submitted that are specific tax situations. And so to those who submitted those questions, we're not going to address them here because it will be too highly specialized. But if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to our team. We'll be sure to add our email so you can reach out to us, and then we can direct you to the correct network site who can help answer your question, because we don't want to get into everyone's specific tax and legal situations here on this call. It's too varied and it varies too much across states. I just have a couple more questions here, and again, the Q&A is open for any more questions the audience has. Josh, I'm going to direct this one to you, just given your experience as a lawyer, given your experience at the Center for Heirs Property Preservation. What do you think it will take for us to scale heirs property resolution across the country? As many panelists have spoken to even prior to this, it's a huge issue facing our community. And so what do you think it will take to scale this resolution across the country, and what types of support and resources might be needed to make that happen? And I know you can't control the future, but what do you think?
Sure. It's been talked about a lot. This is a holistic, systematic approach to addressing this issue, and everything that all the sites do in regards fall along the continuum of getting a family from point A to point Z and getting them clear and free, and that property is theirs and accessible in its truest sense. The only way to do that is one, education, not only for the communities that we serve and the folks that need it the most, but also educating attorneys and educating lawyers to handle these type of cases, because there is a cultural competency that is involved when you're mediating with family members. And that's whether you're in the Gullah Geechee corridor or you're in Appalachia, wherever it may be. The idea is this: it is a holistic approach in order to resolve and sort of make your way through this process, as everybody on this call can testify to. So that educational component is key. And the other thing is this: there has to be a lawyer who can do the work and who's trusted and affordable. And if you've got a legal aid organization, even if at the center, clients never pay attorney's fees, but they still are responsible for costs. And Karen said it perfectly. A survey can be anywhere from $600 to $20,000. A title search that's needed and required for a quiet title action can be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, depending on how many heirs are going to be searched through every public record. The filing fees, the court costs, the guardian ad litem fees, all the fees that go on, the service of process fees. So even when they're getting free legal work, which itself, if they don't have a legal organization, a legal aid organization that handles these kind of cases, can be anywhere from $250 to $400 an hour, right? And some of these multiple generational cases take years. The last one I finished took 4.5 years. So it is the cost burden is so substantial that we've got to have a way to, one, get these resources to folks who may be in a position where they can't afford to hire an attorney, or they're not in a position to pay the costs even when they have a legal aid organization. Those costs are only going up as time goes by. So in my opinion, in order to truly attack this situation across the country, you need a preventative mechanism. To Alton's point, there are a lot of legal avenues to resolve this issue before it gets to 3 and 4 generations. When mom and dad pass away or your spouse pass away, having a trusted, legal, affordable legal resource to handle that, and people know where to go and they know what they need to do. so at the end of the day, the costs associated with all of this are they're either going to be born further down the line because all these properties are going to be lost, and there's going to be uh, a true loss of rural landscapes and culture and the things that make us uniquely American. The idea of having some source to help fund direct legal services, education to the communities, and educating the public as well as attorneys.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for breaking that down for us, Josh. I appreciated that point too about educating the attorneys as well, because we do as a network talk a lot about educating the landowners and families in the succession planning, but I haven't thought as much about the level of expertise and just care that's needed for lawyers to understand the specific community that we serve as well.
Yeah, the mediation component and getting families together is something that's not necessarily intuitive for attorneys, right? The idea of sitting at a church on a Saturday with 30 heirs and spending 4 hours there. Most attorneys can't do that because it's not cost effective, and some attorneys don't want to do that. and you sort of have to have that sort of training and that sort of mindset to successfully attack these issues, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's great. We have a question that's specifically for Shawn, and then I'll land the plane with my last question for all of the panelists. The question is, and bear with me, I'm going to make sure I read it correctly. In addition to the financial payouts, in what other ways are younger family members encouraged to steward the land and follow in your footsteps?
Wow.
Big question.
Yeah, it is. It's a very big question, and one that's really at the center of how do we as heirs, owners, how do we foster that continued generational wealth? And it's only by getting the next generation involved. You know, my children, at some point, their grandchildren, my siblings and their grandchildren and great grandchildren. I've reached out to great nieces and nephews to share the journey, to share the legacy that they are a part of. And that's probably the biggest thing, is being able to share that journey that their ancestors have taken to get us to this point, and let them know that they have a part to play. You know, it's often said you can't be it if you can't see it, right? Well, they now can see what they have as a legacy, right? Regardless of what, and my family is no different from everybody else's family. We got a cousin Junior or Uncle Joe that has a colored history, right? And maybe that gets amplified more than the positive things that some of the other family members have done. But yeah, reaching back, bringing those new descendants to the property around family reunions, things of that sort. And one of the things I like to do, I like to share a story that my dad told me when I was in Chicago. And we had a house in Chicago, and I'm all of about 14, 15 years old, and my job was to cut the grass. And there was this one Saturday where he says, "You got to go cut the grass." And I'm like, "Cut the grass?" I'm like, "Dad, I got to go meet little Ray Ray and Shaniqua and Kim. We're going to the mall to the movies." And he's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, can I have $20 so I can go to the movies?" And he looks at me very sternly and he says, "Go outside, reach down in that dirt, and bring me back a handful of grass, a handful of dirt." And I look at my father and I'm like, I thought he lost his mind. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So regardless, I go out and I grab the piece of dirt out the ground, bring it back in the house. He says, "Open your hand." I open the hand. He says, "Look at that. That's your land. You own that. Does little Kim and Ray Ray, do they own that land? They're not building any more land. That's yours, and you have to take care of it." And it's that sort of message that I try to impart upon my great nieces and the descendants coming up, whether they're cousins or whatever. And I think that's how we do that. And by the way, I did get the $20 and I did make it to the mall to hang out.
Oh,
Hopefully that answers that question.
yes, it does. It does. Thank you for sharing that. I want to add to what Miss Ebony dropped in the chat because it speaks to what Mr. Shawn just said, which is families should make their land human by telling the story about each generation's experience of the land and how that can also be a really helpful way to get younger generations involved. Well, this has been so rich. I know with heirs property, there's so much we could talk about, especially even getting into the finer details. And so for our partners and people who are here in the room as attendees, if you have thoughts or questions or ideas, that was a part of our hope for this convening, that you would hear what we're experiencing as SFLR network on the ground, and that it would spark new possibilities and ideas in the forestry sector at large as we think about supporting historically underserved landowners. My last question, this is for all of the panelists who want to weigh in on it, is what's at stake if we don't find sustainable and effective solutions for resolving heirs property issues? I just want us to have a really vivid picture of what's at stake here for our landowners, for rural America, for the Southeast, especially for small acreage, limited resource landowners. What's at stake if we don't continue to press on and resolve these challenges? It's a big question, but anyone can jump in.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna jump in real quick. Because we've been talking about the next generation, and so if we don't resolve these issues, there wouldn't be any land for the next generation to work on, to leave behind for their next generation. So I think that's the most critical issue that we must mitigate now. Because I think someone said it earlier in 1910. Oh, in the video. I thought it was a little bit more land in 1910 that we own as Black Americans, but as we see, we went from 15 million acres of land to where we are today. And if the heirs property continue to be the leading issue, then we're going to go down to zero eventually.
Yeah. Thank you, T. Others?
Yeah, I'll just mention, agree with what T is saying. If we don't at least continue to work on it, because this is a tremendous issue, what's at stake is our culture, our economic well-being in communities, our sense of place, loss of forests and what our forests do for us in all those aspects, economically, environmentally, socially. So we need to continue to fight this good fight and get in any good trouble we need to get into to move this needle forward. And it's not going to be easy, but we've got a great core and a great amount of partners who align with our values as well and want to see not only African Americans' forest land protected, but all landowners, because it's a collective out there. When you look across the landscape, small landowners to landowners who have 1,000 acres or more, it takes all of that landscape to provide those nature-based solutions on the challenges around climate and the rural community economics as well. So, and also keep in mind that our forest land is receiving a tremendous amount of pressure, and that pressure is coming from development. And we're losing thousands and millions of acres every year. I can't remember what the number is by 2050, but there are many acres that we could potentially lose. Some of that through development, but some of that through not having our estates in order as well. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Alton. And I saw Miss Karen, and then we'll go Josh, and then we'll land the plane with Mr. Boler if you have anything to add. Yeah.
I think Joe gave a great example of this earlier when he was on. He was talking about how there was this landowner that does it, this family, and they had the 40 acres and somebody bought all of the land around them, and which landlocked them. And they weren't able to do things. They're not able to do things, or it's going to cost them to do some things. So if we continue to lose small landowners, the small acreage, if we don't resolve these air property issues, then we are putting ourselves and our community at a great economic risk. We're putting ourselves in harm's way to where we're going to have to face these mountains that we're not equipped to face. And it's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt us. It's going to hurt this generation. It's going to hurt generations to come. Not understanding the value, of heirs property is how we got to this point. This is why there was the great land loss. And it wasn't just in one community. It's been in many communities, and it will continue to happen. And as so go these small acres, as so go these small remnants, that affects the whole community. That's just the reality. Now you got people who might not even be where you are, might be in another country, that are making decisions that are causing some type of financial impact on you. You might be raising taxes on the property. There are so many things that can happen because somebody else has the ownership of the land, that may not care that we've always gone down here and we've played basketball here, or we can go over here and we can fish over here and something like that. It might not be a big issue to them. All they want to do is come in and build things, and then building, they're tearing down, not understanding that agriculture is the life of the land, and what we do with it comes back on us. And if we don't take care of it, then we're not going to be taken care of. So understanding heirs property, understanding the value of people and the land with the people is so crucial to the vitality of all people. That's how crucial understanding and resolving heirs property is.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Josh?
Yeah, the point I would make too is that it never gets easier. It's a long, difficult process for a family to navigate an heirs property case from beginning to end, but it's never easier than it is today, because as people pass away, that collective gets larger and larger. And to Karen's point, somebody's going to marry in and they're going to inherit, and they could give a rip about the property. So the longer that group of tenants in common grows, the more people that aren't tied to the land in any kind of familiar way get ownership, and they're more susceptible to being approached by a developer, right? So as difficult as you might think it is, as difficult as that uncle that you don't want to talk to may be, it'll never be easier than it is today, because as that group grows, it becomes more and more difficult. And real quickly to that point, we probably see north of 700 intakes a year here at the center, people coming in needing work. Roughly 20% want to move forward if they're accepted.
Wow.
So they get the free consultation, and family dynamic can lead them to not wanting to move forward, and even with the mediation. So it's not a static problem either. There's not a finite number of heirs property acres. All it takes is someone owning property to pass away, and the intestacy law comes in because there's no will, and you've got a brand new heirs property tract.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that and putting that in perspective for us, Josh. Last but not least, for our time together today, Mr. Shawn Boler, what's at stake here?
Bethaney, I can't add much more to what has already been said by my esteemed panelists. This is why I say I don't know what I don't know until I hear them speak, and I hang on every syllable of everything that they say. Only thing you don't know what you're going to lose until you can hold it. So going back to my early analogy, make sure that you get this next generation to go grab that piece of dirt, get your hands dirty, have them smell it, taste it, so they know what's at risk to be lost.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Boler. And thank you so much to all of our panelists here I so enjoy learning from you, working alongside you. The work that you're doing is incredible. And I know you're doing it with your whole heart. And so just thank you for sharing of that overflow and wisdom with all of us today. We can give a round of applause to our final panelists today in the chat. Thank you so much for being with us.